Today is the 73rd anniversary of the first ever Aer Lingus fatal plane crash, and there are a lot of Sligo connections in relation to that tragic incident. The C-47 Aer Lingus aircraft was en route from London to Dublin on the 10th of January 1952 when it crashed in Wales. Unfortunately, all 20 passengers and 3 crew members died in the crash. And the family members of some of those who lost their lives have been talking with Joe Duffy, I heard on RT's Lifeline this week. As I say, many local connections here, not least the author of a trilogy of books on the crash, Gavin Walsh from Sligo, who's on the line now. Gavin has put years of time and effort into investigating and chronicling what happened. 14 years in all, Gavin. That's a long time.
14, Niall.
Yeah. And it all arose, and it all arose from your point of view by accident. You read an article in the Sligo Champion in relation to this.
Yeah, well, first of all, well before that, back in a national school, in Carrow National School, a school teacher in a geography class we were doing something about Wales, and he pointed and he said, and it was North Wales, that's where Aer Lingus had their first plane crash. And even though I was quite young, I believe I was 9 or 10, I was cognizant of Tusker Rock, and Tusker Rock, of course, was off Wexford. And anyway, he put correction on me or whatever and said, no, that was their first crash. And that in some way went into my mind. And many, many years later, I was taking flying lessons in Strandhill, and my instructor, a local man, Jerry O'Hara, it came up, I must have brought it up in conversation, and he said, oh, yeah, Cuhan's bookshop in Castle Street. John Cuhan, that's a brother of the captain of that aircraft. Yeah. Now, what neither he nor I nor anyone that to my knowledge knew at that time was that the plane was still in the bog with a lot of the passengers, including Captain Cuhan, in the plane. But anyway, in 2011, I was doing just simple family research, and I stumbled on the front page of the Sligo Champion from January the 19th, 1952, the week after the crash, and full front page blazing back at me was Christy McCran, a full newspaper headline how Christy McCran was on the lead rescue squad that went up the mountaintop that very evening. They were up there about 2.5 hours after the crash. So another very strong Sligo connection there.
Which is quite incredible. And the captain on that day, as you say, was Jimmy Cuhan, wasn't that right? He was the captain.
Yeah, James Richard, known as Jimmy Cuhan. He was from Youghal, County Cork. He and his brother were farmed out and adopted because their mother died young, and they ended up in Bristol with a quite wealthy relation. I believe it was a full first cousin of their mother's, and this guy had a chain of bookshops. And Jimmy was very young at the time, and Jimmy was subsequently farmed out to this guy's aunt. So Jimmy ended up with actually a grand-aunt-in-law being raised by her. And at a very young age, 17 or 18, he volunteered and joined the RAF. So there he had an Irishman volunteering in the RAF to fight in World War II. And he carried out some daring raids, one of which was finally recognised 20 years ago in a book in the Kattegat in the last days of the war. His brother John went to university over there and came back, married a woman from Tubbercurry called Slee, and she was from Tubbercurry, and they came to Sligo. Now, John was a chemist. John would be a brother of Jimmy, the captain, and he worked in one of the chemists in town, and eventually he set about opening up his own bookshop, just as he had worked part-time in one of the bookshops in Bristol for the man who I guess raised them or who adopted them. So it's quite a strong Sligo connection, given that John Cuhan opened his bookshop as far back as 1947. Yeah. And indeed, as Michael Cuhan, the son of John, has assured me, Jimmy Cuhan was in Sligo town several times and stayed above the newsagents in Castle Street. So,
as you say, the plane crashed into a mountain in Wales en route from London to Dublin.
Yes.
Tell us briefly exactly what happened and why you feel a further investigation is needed.
First of all, if I may just deduct the word feel, it's not a word, it's know, and the people that have looked at it know it. And several people have looked at my work, including the AAIB, which is the official air accident body in Britain. And they themselves at one point started an inquiry into my inquiry, and then for reasons only beknownst to them, they quit on the grounds that they recused themselves, that it was so far back and on several technical matters. But at not one stage did they pick up on my 236-page report into their report, which was abysmal to say the least. The simple reality of it is that Captain Cam was never where they put him at when that plane got into trouble. He was travelling in the opposite direction. So he was stitched up every way in the days after the crash. And obviously the $64,000 question is, why was that done? Well, it was done to protect the airline. and to minimise litigation in the aftermath of the crash.
There was a cover up from an early stage, you feel?
There was a phenomenal cover up, not from an early stage, from 11:45 p.m. that night. A gang, 7 people, a leading Irish air crash investigator, were sent over by special plane to Wales. None of this is circumstantial. These are factual facts of life. They were sent over, and they were up on that mountaintop early the next morning. Now, a British policeman, I have all the British police statements, a British police officer, the head of the police in that particular, he came from a village called Bedgellert. He knew the seriousness of the implication of letting people into a crash site, and he refused them. But one of them stood forward and showed his credentials as being an Irish air crash investigator, and he was let through. And it is that man that worked the whole investigation. And I have named him, and I've named he's only a puppet. I've named the puppeteers who sent him out to do his work. They're all named in the final volume, 236 pages of it.
You say the bodies remain in the bog.
I say that a substantial amount of the bodies remain in the bog. Several of them, whatever is left of them from the acidity of the bog, there might be only bones. But what did come home, and I promised never to be graphic in my story, and I'm not even going to be graphic here with you now, but I did also get the full coroner's reports, and what came home was obviously not worth talking about. So even those that are buried here, there was 10 bodies brought back, whether to England, Ireland or Scotland. But what was brought back was minuscule. Basically, my argument would be, if anyone wants to go down the road, is that 80% of the human remains are still in the St. Kevin.
And they should be returned to
I do not have an opinion on that, but I have no problem if I'm asked, should the government exhume the aircraft, because I believe the aircraft, if it's exhumed, will show that my cause of the crash and not their cause of the crash is correct.
Your work in this is truly exhaustive, Gavin. You've written 3 large volumes on the crash. It's consumed your life, I presume, over 40 days.
It has become my life. It is my life. And, whatever it takes, I'm going to see it through. And if I have to draw my last breath, and it is a breath I will gladly draw, I will see it all the way through. And what I'm meeting now, because the story is finally breaking, the opposition I am meeting from mainstream media, and I want to thank you profusely for allowing me on to speak my mind. The opposition I am facing from mainstream media is it's incredible. It's just zero contact, lock up all the doors, lock the walls, have nothing to say to them. And I appreciate that a lot of that goes back to litigation. And I want to also go on record as saying that I am very proud of our national airline, Aer Lingus, today's airline. And what was done yesterday would never be done today. The word presentism comes to mind. You cannot compare yesteryear to today. But the simple fact is that a gross injustice was done on a young Irishman who volunteered and fought for Britain. And the British government stood back. Their lead investigator, he's named in Volume 3 as well. He didn't want anything to do with this cover-up. He took a backseat, and the Irish guys ran the whole thing. They put Jimmy Kuhan, of course, and to add insult to injury, Jimmy is left in the plane to this very day. A senior captain in Aer Lingus, I may add.
How would this story be satisfactorily resolved, you think, ultimately, Gavin? And I know you've been in contact with the bereaved families down the years, and what do they want? What do you want to come out of all this?
Well, I can only tell you they have their own, I'm sure, their own wishes, and some of them do want their bodies returned. My only wish is that they acknowledge that Jimmy Kuhan was never where they put him. They put him 20.5 statute or 18.0 nautical miles, of course. They put him in the wrong direction. I want all that to be investigated. And if I'm wrong, there's 64 air crash investigators in Britain in the government body. There's 14 here in Ireland. I'm willing to meet any one of them on a 1-to-1 basis, on a 1-to-76 basis. We can do it on camera, in camera, off camera. They can bring all their stuff with them, all their notes, their iPads, their PhDs. I'll just bring me. That's how confident I am of my story. And what I do have that nobody can take from me is the witness statements that Aer Lingus thought they had destroyed. They had destroyed 2 sets of them, but one set of them was kept by a duty-bound, diligent police officer in a small little village called Pennygross. Now, I had to go and live in North Wales to garner the trust of the people of North Wales to turn me over a lot of these documents. And so far, I have 1,064 ultra valuable documents that should never have seen the light of day. So we're at a juncture here. I either invented a time machine and got into it and went back in time and invented all this stuff, or this is all very real. And also, a lot of the witnesses that witnessed the plane going around in terrible agony. The plane was on fire, by the way, for several minutes before it crashed. And the investigators, the powers that be, never, ever wanted that coming out. And those people are still alive today. Some of those people, are still alive today. So again, they're either in on this lie with me or we're all telling the truth.
The three books are Shamrock 165, Thy Will Be Done, The Unknown Crash, and Decision over Dáil. Is that
Dáil?
It's a Welsh name, obviously.
And I would like to just say, Niall, that those books are, the Volume 1 and Volume 2 are very limited at this stage. At this point, I think I only ever printed 1,000 of each, private publication. I never wanted to go mainstream with the story until it broke. And now that I want to, I can't because of the bigger powers that be. But in any event, they're available in Library Bookshop on O'Connell Street, Leitrim Genealogical Society in Ballinamore, and Joe O'Brien's Corner Shop in Lanesborough, Longford. So.
Yeah. And your work will continue, Gavin. You're not giving up on this.
I am. After listening to Joe Duffy's show yesterday, and it was great. It's fantastic publicity. But a guy from America rang me, and he said it was like getting served a fine cup of tea in fine china, silver spoon, everything, sugar milk, but no tea bag. In other words, I wasn't there, and that's fine. I never did this for fame or fortune, but I am not giving up till Jimmy Keohane is recognised for where he is and what his spirit has been put through. And I would like to send this out to anyone listening to this. There are 174 TDs and 60 senators, and I'm approaching each and every one of them to see will any of them take the case and read my story out. I understand they have Dáil privilege. Well, get me into the Dáil and I don't need any privilege. And I'll read out the 4-minute statement.